On Christmas Day, to celebrate my new job, my parents used half of their life savings to buy me a car. It was supposed to be an ordinary Christmas like any other, with snowflakes dancing gently over our small town in mid-Michigan, the shops along the streets adorned with holiday decorations, their red and green lights twinkling merrily. I had expected nothing more than a warm family dinner, but I could never have imagined that this Christmas would become the turning point that would forever change the course of my entire life. During dinner, Dad Robert and Mom Patricia sat at the dining table, their faces glowing with anticipation. They had prepared a simple but thoughtfully crafted meal, and though it consisted of ordinary home-cooked dishes, I could see they had put considerable care into every detail. Mom had even baked an apple pie, my favorite dessert since childhood, filling the kitchen with the warm scent of cinnamon and fresh-baked pastry. Dad reached into his pants pocket and pulled out a greeting card decorated with red hearts. His hand trembled slightly, and I could see he was nervous, like someone about to make an important announcement that had been weighing on his mind for days. The card bore a heartwarming message written in Mom's careful handwriting. Dearest daughter, from now on, Dad and Mom will walk this journey alongside you. We wish you all the best in your new job. We love you with all our hearts. Love always, Dad and Mom. Mom looked at me with eyes full of expectation, her gaze sparkling with barely contained excitement. Sweetheart, do you like it? From now on, you won't have to struggle with taking the bus to work every day anymore. You know, we've been thinking about how you always have to wake up at 5 in the morning just to catch the bus, and sometimes you have to wait so long in the cold. When the weather turns bad, it gets even worse. So we decided to buy you a car. This way, you can drive yourself to work and never have to endure the wind and rain again. As she spoke, her eyes began to well up with tears. I could feel her genuine concern for me, but a sense of unease began to creep into my heart, like a shadow falling across a sunny day. Why don't we go outside and take a look? The car is parked right out front, Dad said softly, his voice carrying a mixture of pride and nervousness. I remained silent and mechanically followed them outside. There in the winter snow sat a used Honda Civic. Its paint had faded considerably, and it appeared to be at least 5 or 6 years old. The surface showed small scratches and dings, but my parents had obviously spent considerable effort making it look as presentable as possible, even waxing it until it gleamed under the streetlights. We searched Auto Trader for weeks before we found this one, Mom said happily, her voice filled with the satisfaction of someone who had found a great bargain. It may not be brand new, but it's in excellent condition. The mechanic checked it thoroughly, and the engine is perfectly sound. Most importantly, it was within our price range. She was absolutely right about that. I turned around and walked back into the dining room, my expression completely blank as I picked up the greeting card with its cheerful red hearts. Without a word, I walked over to the garbage can and threw it in. The entire living room seemed to freeze in that instant. Dad's face turned ashen white, and he sank into his chair as if his legs could no longer support him, his hands beginning to shake uncontrollably. Mom's eyes immediately filled with tears that threatened to spill over. She moved toward me, reaching out as if to take my hand in hers. Grace, are you disappointed with the car? But your father and I have truly done our very best. This car's price was already at the absolute limit of what we could afford. Mom's voice caught with emotion, barely above a whisper. I cut her off with a voice that was calm but resolute, each word carefully measured. Dad, Mom, let us sever our relationship. I will no longer be your daughter. Starting today, I am formally cutting all ties between us as parent and child. The room fell into a deathly silence. Dad trembled as he tried to stand, attempting to say something, but ultimately no words came out. Mom immediately collapsed to her knees, her sobs echoing throughout the entire living room, like the wail of someone who had lost everything precious in the world. Grace, what kind of nonsense are you talking about? Dad's voice was filled with shock and panic, as if he could not comprehend what he was hearing. Mom frantically grabbed my arm, her entire body shaking like someone about to lose something irreplaceable. Sweetheart, you're just joking with Mom and Dad, aren't you? Please tell me this is just a joke, right? Please. She held on to me desperately, as if letting go would mean losing me forever. But I coldly pushed her hands away, my movements deliberate and final. I am not joking. I looked at her with eyes devoid of any warmth. This has nothing whatsoever to do with the car. Then what in heaven's name is this about? Dad slammed his palm down hard on the dining table, the sound reverberating through the room. He stood up, his face a mixture of anger and anguish, his voice rising with each word. Grace, we raised you for over 20 years, provided for your every need, sent you to college, paid for your entire education, helped you find job connections through our networks. What has this family ever done to wrong you? Have you gotten too big for your britches now that you have a job at a major corporation? Do you think you're too good for working-class people like us? His voice cracked with hurt and bewilderment. Mom screamed, cutting him off. Robert, don't you dare speak about my daughter that way! But then she turned to me, tears streaming down her face, her voice taking on an almost pleading tone. Sweetheart, don't listen to your father's harsh words. Are you having troubles at work? Is someone giving you a hard time? Talk to Mom about it. Even though I may not have much influence, I can still try to help you figure things out. We're family, and there's no obstacle that family cannot overcome together. Family. Hearing those 3 words made me laugh coldly inside. I abruptly broke free from Mom's embrace and turned to leave, no longer interested in watching this ridiculous performance. My steps were quick and determined as I headed toward the stairs, planning to pack my belongings. Grace, where are you going? Dad shouted at my retreating figure, his voice filled with a desperation I had never heard before. Without turning around, I answered, somewhere where neither of you exist. Behind me, I heard Dad's muffled, self-reproaching sounds as he pounded the table. It sounded as if he was continuously berating himself. It's all my fault. It's all my fault for being worthless. It's all my fault for letting my daughter down. Then came the heavy sound of someone falling to their knees. Mom had collapsed on the dining room floor, her cries so piercing that I had to cover my ears to block them out. Grace, please don't leave. Mom is begging you on her knees. You cannot abandon your parents. Please, I'm begging you, don't leave us. But I did not stop walking, nor did I look back. I rushed to my room and pulled out a large suitcase, beginning to throw clothes and personal items inside. My hands were trembling, but my resolve remained unshaken. After leaving the house, I took out my phone and dialed my best friend, Emily, who was interning at a law firm. Hey, Grace, why aren't you spending Christmas with your parents? What made you think of calling me? I could hear the cheerful sounds of Emily's family celebration in the background, and I could even make out her parents asking about how I was doing. A bitter smile crossed my lips. Christmas should have been a time for family reunions and joy, but from this day forward, I would have no family. Emily, I need you to help me draft a legal document severing family ties. The sooner the better. My voice sounded emotionless and cold. There was immediate silence on the other end of the line. Then Emily's serious voice came through. All right, I'll start working on it right now. Grace, what happened? But I did not answer her question. I simply hung up the phone. After hanging up, I wandered aimlessly through the night like a lost soul with nowhere to go. The December wind cut through my face with an icy sharpness that was painful, but it could not compare to the cold emptiness I felt in my heart. I walked the streets for what felt like hours, finally sitting down on a bench in front of a 24-hour convenience store, watching the passing cars and pedestrians, not recognizing a single face in the crowd. My boyfriend, Daniel Mitchell, found me when it had already started to rain. He rushed over frantically and held me tightly in his arms. He was wearing an expensive cashmere coat, and I could smell his usual cologne mixed with the dampness of the evening air. "Grace, your parents called me and said you had run away. I was so worried about you. You've been out here for hours. Why didn't you answer my calls?" His voice was filled with concern, sounding like someone who truly loved me. But perhaps this was where all the lies began. I buried my head in his shoulder and began to cry softly. "Daniel, from now on, I have no family." Daniel's breathing caught, and his entire body tensed. I could feel him processing what I had just said, trying to understand the implications. "What happened? Did you have an argument with your aunt and uncle?" His voice carried concern, but also a quality that I now recognize as artificial. "Starting today, Robert and Patricia are nothing to me." I looked at him seriously, speaking in a voice only he and I could hear. Daniel's expression immediately froze. Daniel brought me back to the new house he had prepared for us. It was a beautiful little suburban villa surrounded by quiet neighborhoods. Every decoration in the rooms had been chosen together by Daniel and me: the color of the sofa, the pattern of the bed sheets, the arrangement of the kitchen. This place should have been the beginning of our new life together, but now it felt like a mockery. Daniel gently helped me dry my hair, then asked with a voice that was both anxious and careful, "Grace, what in the world happened? We had agreed you were just going home to have Christmas dinner with your aunt and uncle. How did things turn out this way?" I took a deep breath and began to tell the story. "They gave me a car, a used Honda Civic. They said it was to celebrate my new job and claimed they had spent half a lifetime of savings on it. The car keys sat quietly on the dining table, and while it looked clean, it also had an unmistakably cheap quality to it. Dad said this money was what he and Mom had saved penny by penny from their salaries. He said that in order to gather enough money, he had even taken on part-time driving jobs. Mom said she was worried that taking the bus to work every day was too hard on me." My voice began to take on a sharp edge. They kept emphasizing how difficult and hard-working and selfless they were. But all of this was really meant to make me feel that I should be grateful to them. I should feel guilty because of their sacrifices. But wasn't that actually quite thoughtful? "Your aunt and uncle love you so much," Daniel said. His tone sounded reasonable and normal, exactly what a rational person should say. But I knew he was wrong, or rather, he simply did not want to understand me. "Yes, they love me very much." I began to recount my memories. "From childhood until now, they have always done their utmost to give me the best things they could, no matter how much they themselves suffered. They never complained. I remember when I was little, I envied the neighbors' children who all had electronic keyboards. Dad immediately went online and searched for hours to buy me the best one he could find. For this purchase, they worked overtime for more than half a month, and Dad even started smoking because of work stress. I can still remember him hiding in the garage to smoke cheap cigarettes, trying not to let Mom see him. When I started college, Daniel, you and I became officially involved. You come from a wealthy family, and my parents were afraid I would feel inferior in front of your family. Mom took me to the mall and bought me my first set of designer clothes and skincare products. She said, "Our family may be poor, but we cannot let people look down on us." But when she handed her credit card to the sales associate, I saw her hands trembling. In that moment, I saw not a mother's love for her daughter, but a deep sense of powerlessness. Daniel listened to my story, his expression becoming increasingly complex. Grace. He wanted to say something, but ultimately remained silent. Do you love me, Daniel? I suddenly asked him. Of course I love you, he immediately replied. I will take good care of you. I will make you the happiest woman in the world. His words sounded perfect, like lines from a movie. But now I understood how many lies were contained in that sentence. Seeing that I remained silent, Daniel continued. Grace, I think you should go back and apologize to your aunt and uncle. It hasn't been easy for them to raise you to this point, and you need to learn gratitude. You cannot say such hurtful things over small matters and break their hearts. I stared at him in disbelief. Just like that, with a few simple words, he had defined me as an ungrateful, willful, and unfilial daughter. My story, my pain, my grievances seemed to not exist in his eyes. Even you think I was wrong? I asked him coldly. A flash of impatience crossed Daniel's face, and he was about to speak in his defense when the doorbell rang at the most inopportune moment. Daniel frowned and went to answer the door. Standing outside were Dad and Mom. They looked quite disheveled. Mom's eyes were severely swollen and red, clearly from hours of crying. Dad was in no better condition, his face full of exhaustion and stubble, as if he had aged 10 years overnight. Daughter! Mom rushed over to me as soon as she saw me. Come home with us, please. Mom will agree to anything you want. Dad pulled out a wrinkled envelope from his pocket and pressed it into my hands. His hands were shaking, and I could feel his inner turmoil. There's $10,000 in here, Grace. This is all the savings your parents have left. Consider it our way of making things up to you. His voice sounded hoarse, as if he had used all his strength just to say these words. We are useless and couldn't buy you a more expensive car. Take this money and buy something you like. Clothes, bags, anything. Buy whatever you want. As long as you're happy, as long as you stop saying those things, okay? I held the envelope, feeling the thickness of the stack of bills inside. $10,000. This was their entire savings. I looked at Dad's pale face, then at Mom's tear-swollen eyes. How ridiculous. Grace, your father took on night shift ride-sharing jobs after work just to scrape together money for your car, and his back is nearly breaking. How could you hurt his heart like this? Mom sobbed as she spoke, and though she was crying, her tone was full of accusations directed at me. In that moment, I saw everything clearly. Their tears and complaints were all meant to emotionally manipulate me. At that moment, Daniel suddenly rushed over, snatched the envelope from my hands, and forcefully shoved it back into Dad's arms. His face flushed red with anger, looking like he was about to explode. Enough, Grace! How long are you going to keep this up? For the sake of your vanity, look what you've driven your aunt and uncle to. Look at them. Can you be less materialistic? Over such a small matter, you want to cut ties with your parents? Do you have any conscience left? We're about to get married. He looked at me with angry, disappointed eyes. In that moment, I saw the face of a stranger. I stood there in shock, and then I began to laugh. I laughed loudly, almost to the point of tears. But this was not laughter of joy, but rather desperate, sarcastic laughter. Daniel, you are absolutely right. I have no conscience. My voice was calm, frighteningly calm. As for marriage, I think that's no longer necessary. Let's break up. With that, I turned and left without looking back. Behind me came Mom's heart-wrenching screams, Dad's angry shouts, and Daniel's furious "Get back here!" delivered through gritted teeth. But I did not turn around. From that day forward, I cut off all contact with my family and rented a small apartment near my office. The place was indeed tiny, with only one bedroom, a small kitchen, and a bathroom. But in my view, It was far better than that house full of lies. 3 days later, Emily met me at the coffee shop downstairs from my office building and handed me the legal document she had worked on all night. The document was very professional, filled with legal terminology. Emily told me that as long as Robert and Patricia signed it, the agreement could take effect. I carefully read through the contents. This document was more of a declaration, really, stating that while the legal obligation of support between Robert, Patricia, and myself would still exist, this was not what I truly wanted. What I wanted was an attitude. They needed to admit they were wrong. "Look, this is what life is like for a wealthy family's young lady," suddenly, Emily exclaimed, pointing her phone toward the video playing on the coffee shop screen. I looked up. In the video, a young woman I had never seen before sat in a brand new red Lamborghini. She wore haute couture clothing, her makeup was exquisite, and her face radiated a brilliant smile. She held the steering wheel, smiling sweetly, looking like a princess blessed by life itself. The video's caption read, "Compared to the Lamborghini, having mom and dad's company is the best Christmas gift of all." But this sentence seemed ironic, because clearly this girl had gotten both the Lamborghini and her parents' company. Looking at this girl's sweet smile, my fingers suddenly gripped my coffee cup tightly. "Grace, don't you think this girl looks a bit like you?" Emily teased. "Do you suppose you could be long-lost sisters?" I laughed self-deprecatingly. Her father is a billionaire who casually gives away luxury cars worth hundreds of thousands. How could someone like me possibly be related to someone of her caliber? But even as I said this, a terrible suspicion began forming in my heart. Emily looked at me in shock, seeming to sense something was amiss in my tone. "Grace, what's wrong?" she asked. I shook my head, trying to appear nonchalant. "Nothing, I'm fine." But the atmosphere remained heavy. Emily kept trying to say things to cheer me up, but I simply could not laugh. My mind kept returning to that girl, wondering about her relationship with Robert and Patricia, wondering why I had never heard about having a sister. "All right, I'm really okay. You should get back to work," I finally said. I put the legal documents in my bag and was about to leave. But at that moment, Daniel burst into the coffee shop and grabbed my hand, pulling me outside. His face looked terrible, his eyes filled with urgency. "Grace, come with me quickly. Your aunt and uncle have been hospitalized because of you. Did you know that?" Daniel forcibly dragged me to the hospital. When we entered the hospital room, I saw a scene I will never forget. Dad was connected to various medical devices, oxygen tubes, IV lines, heart monitors. He looked extremely weak, his face pale, his lips purple. Mom sat beside the bed, her eyes swollen like walnuts, continuously wiping away tears. Seeing this scene, Daniel immediately became furious. He suddenly grabbed my collar, his voice loud enough to echo throughout the hospital corridor. "Grace, look what you've done. Are you determined to literally worry your uncle to death?" His loud voice drew the attention of many passing patients and family members. They all looked at me with expressions of surprise and judgment. I remained silent, calmly looking at him and my parents. But this calm apparently angered Daniel even more. "Grace, I never realized how cold-blooded and heartless you could be. That's your biological father lying there. Is your heart made of stone? I just want to ask you today, what exactly do you want? Do you have to tear this family apart completely?" At that moment, Mom, who had been crying, suddenly stood up. She walked over to me and did something that shocked me. She positioned herself protectively between Daniel and me, as if shielding me. "Daniel, don't scold Grace. This isn't her fault. We, as her parents, are useless and cannot satisfy our child's needs," Mom cried while defending me, looking like a typical loving mother. But now I realized what was happening. I looked at the two of them with a calm expression. Under the astonished gazes of the surrounding people, I pulled out the legal document Emily had prepared for me from my bag. Since everyone's here, this is perfect. Sign this agreement to sever our family ties, I said coldly. A collective gasp arose from the people in the corridor. I could clearly hear their whispered comments. What's wrong with this girl? This is too much. Exactly. Her parents raised her all these years, and she wants to cut ties with them. How is this different from being ungrateful? I heard it's because her parents bought her a car that she thought was too cheap. If I had a daughter like this... Their voices faded as I deliberately ignored them. Mom looked at me in disbelief, her body trembling as if she might collapse. Her voice became shrill. Grace, sweetheart, you're trying to force us to death. Daniel was shaking with rage. Are you even human? Your uncle has been driven into a coma because of you, and now you're still trying to upset your aunt with this kind of thing? Is this what you call having a conscience? I raised my head, meeting his angry gaze, and said in a very calm voice, Since the family is so poor, maybe we shouldn't bother treating Dad at all. The daily medical costs here are quite expensive. Saving that money might buy another car. My words touched on the deepest taboo. Daniel's face instantly became distorted, and he raised his hand high. Slap! A crisp sound echoed throughout the hospital corridor. My cheek immediately burned with pain, half my face going numb. But I still pushed the legal document toward Mom's hands without regard for anything else. Mom screamed and knocked the papers from her hands, scattering them across the floor. But among those scattered papers, one document fell out that did not belong. Mom's eyes were immediately drawn to the words on that paper. She slowly bent down and picked it up with trembling hands. When she read the contents clearly, her entire body went rigid. She looked up at me with eyes filled with shock and fear. The people in the corridor did not understand what was happening and continued their accusations and judgments. Young people these days are just too materialistic. For money, they'll even abandon their biological parents. Exactly. Look how heartbroken her mother is. But this girl shows no reaction at all. Even if I raised a dog, at least it would know to wag its tail to make me happy. I bit my lip hard, but remained silent. The people's comments reached my ears clearly, but I no longer cared. But then, Daniel rushed over and crumpled the remaining papers in my hands into a ball, stomping on them hard. His lips trembled, and his eyes no longer showed anger, but were filled with shock and a fear I could not understand. It's fake! This has to be fake! Grace, tell me this isn't real! His voice carried an almost pleading tone. Mom stopped crying. She held me tightly, but her hands were trembling violently, as if grasping the last lifeline. Grace, since you already know, why didn't you tell us? This sudden turn of events drew the nurses and other patients' families closer, craning their necks to see what was happening, completely puzzled by this unexpected reversal. Looking at these two people's suddenly changed faces, transforming from anger and accusation to self-blame and guilt, I had to admire their acting skills. They really should have pursued careers in Hollywood. I calmly broke free from Mom's grasp. Then I bent down and carefully picked up the crumpled papers from the floor, smoothing them out, and handed them back to Mom. Now, are you willing to sign? I asked in a very calm tone. Mom continued shaking her head. She pushed the papers away, looking at me through tears. Grace, even knowing this, I still won't sign. As long as you're willing to come back, Mom and Dad will give you all our money from now on. I swear. Daniel also nodded in agreement. That's right, Grace. Even at this point, why are you still thinking about severing ties? I'm saying this here today. If you ever need money in the future, just ask me directly. No matter how much you need, I'll give it to you. If that's still not enough, I'll sell the house and cars at home. I'm willing to do anything for you. Daniel's words immediately stunned everyone in the corridor. I could hear the whispered comments shift direction. Her boyfriend is so good to her, he's even willing to sell his house and car to meet her demands. Where can you find such a perfect man? I agree, this girl is just too unreasonable. Having such caring family members, she doesn't know how to appreciate what she has. Family members? Hearing those 3 words again, I still wanted to laugh, but I held it in. Seeing my silence, Daniel's expression became even more pained. He looked at me with concern, walked over, and gently placed his hands on my shoulders. Grace, even if you have a serious illness that requires money, you should tell us. We're family, and we can always find a way together. I raised an eyebrow and asked in a very cold tone, I have a serious illness? Mom looked at me with tears and said, Grace, I saw the words on that paper just now. You don't need to hide it from us anymore. It's a cost estimate for bone marrow transplantation, isn't it? Her face was filled with anxiety. It's Mom and Dad's fault for not caring enough about you. Don't worry, even if we have to sell everything we own, Mom will make sure you get treatment. You must not give up. As long as we can cure your illness, Mom and Dad are willing to do anything. Mom's voice was filled with tears. Her acting was indeed superb, that genuine emotion enough to move everyone present. The corridor's opinion immediately shifted again. Oh my God, so this girl has a terminal illness. No wonder her personality changed. How pitiful, she doesn't want to burden her family. Her parents and boyfriend are really good, staying by her side through everything. But these people's words only made me want to laugh. I coldly raised the paper in my hand. You mean this? This is indeed a cost estimate for bone marrow transplantation. But are you sure you can afford this amount? Mom's expression immediately stiffened, and her eyes began to look evasive. Mom, have you forgotten? I began listing the facts one by one. The house you live in is an old, small place in the suburbs that cost less than $100,000 when you bought it. Our family is dirt poor, and your only savings went to buying me that used Honda. Oh, right, the family still has $10,000 in savings. I continued in the sharpest tone possible. But Dad's current hospital room isn't cheap, is it? I've seen the price list. At this facility's rates, that $10,000 might not last even one night. So please tell me, what will you use to pay for the bone marrow transplantation? That requires hundreds of thousands of dollars. Mom's face immediately turned white. She looked at this luxury hospital room, private bathroom, LCD television, premium bed, with an expression of someone caught in a lie. She gritted her teeth and tried to explain. I chose this room because I was thinking that your father has suffered his whole life, and I didn't want him to be uncomfortable. Her voice became very small and weak. And actually, the family does have some savings. I just didn't tell you because I was afraid you might spend money carelessly. Chapter 9. The Peeling Away of Lies. In that moment, all her explanations became utterly pale and weak. I laughed coldly. So you've been pretending to be poor all these years? The panic in Mom's eyes became even more obvious. She wanted to say something, but ultimately could not speak. At this point, Daniel stepped forward, trying to interrupt the conversation between Mom and me. He used what I had once considered an incredibly gentle tone. Grace, I know having a serious illness makes you feel terrible, but you can't hurt your aunt and uncle like this. They're doing this for your own good. For my own good? A mocking smile crossed my lips. My gaze became ice-cold and sharp, like a blade pointed at Daniel. But he seemed unaware, continuing with his false gentleness. Grace, we can discuss everything else later. The most important thing right now is treating your illness. I'll contact the best international specialists immediately. No matter how much it costs, we must cure you. His gaze looked incredibly determined, like a hero willing to sacrifice everything for love. He approached me, wanting to take my hand. If this had been a month ago, I might have been moved to tears. But now, I only found his hypocrisy nauseating. I forcefully pushed him away. I ignored his deep feelings and turned my gaze back to Mom, whose expression was becoming increasingly unnatural. Since you still have some savings, why don't you take them out right here in front of everyone? My voice carried a strange calm. By the way, I don't like the used Honda you gave me for Christmas. I want to exchange it for a Lamborghini, just like the one that girl was driving in the video. As soon as those words left my mouth, the entire hospital room fell silent. Even the people in the corridor who had been discussing the situation closed their mouths. Mom stared at me in shock. Her lips trembled as she tried to say something, but ultimately could not speak. Grace, what are you talking about? Even though our family has some money, how could we possibly afford a Lamborghini? Those cars are so expensive. She instinctively reached for my hand, but I sidestepped to avoid her. I looked at her with a mocking expression and asked in the calmest yet sharpest tone, "Is it that you can't afford it, or that you don't want to buy it for me?" As I pressed the question, Mom's face became as white as paper. Daniel's heart clearly skipped a beat. He tried to use a smile to cover his nervousness, but the smile looked stiff and fake. "Grace, aren't you being unreasonable with your aunt and uncle? That kind of luxury car isn't something ordinary people can afford." I continued in a very relaxed tone. "A car worth hundreds of thousands is indeed not something ordinary people can afford. But didn't they just buy one on Christmas Day?" Mom's body immediately swayed. Her face grew paler and paler, her eyes filled with panic. "Grace, are you mistaken? We only bought you a used Honda for Christmas." I could not help but laugh coldly. "Is that so? Then who bought Victoria the Lamborghini she was driving on Christmas? Would you like to see her video? I've downloaded it." When the name Victoria came from my mouth, Mom's entire body froze. She could no longer speak. Her mouth opened and closed, but ultimately only produced some incoherent sounds. I stared at her intently, continuing in a calm but accusatory tone. "You claimed to have spent half your life's savings but only bought me a used Honda. Yet you turned around and bought Victoria a Lamborghini. Is this what you call love? Is this your gratitude toward me?" Mom slumped against the wall and collapsed to the floor. Her entire body was trembling, as if experiencing a mental breakdown. Daniel frowned, his tone becoming irritable and impatient. "Grace, what exactly are you trying to say? Victoria is a different matter entirely. Her parents—" He suddenly stopped speaking, as if realizing he had let something slip. "Her parents?" I repeated his words in a dangerous tone. "Daniel, you know about Victoria's existence? You know who she is? You know what her relationship is to me?" Daniel's face instantly turned the gray color of death. His mouth opened and closed, but he could not speak. "How much longer do you want to keep pretending? Do you really think I don't know?" I moved closer to him, speaking in a voice only he could hear. "Victoria, my sister, my parents' other daughter. All these years, they've been performing one touching drama after another in front of me. But behind my back, they've been giving all the real wealth and luxury to their other daughter." My voice began to grow louder, echoing throughout the hospital corridor. Each word was like a knife, stripping away their hypocritical masks. "You!" Dad struggled to sit up in bed, but his body was obviously too weak. His face turned blue-purple, as if he was holding something back. I took out my phone and opened my photo album. My fingers scrolled through image after image. "All these years, behind my back, you bought 3 houses. One high-end apartment in the city center, one detached villa in the suburbs, and one vacation home by the ocean. You bought Victoria 2 luxury cars, that Lamborghini and a Mercedes. You enrolled her in the most expensive private schools, had her learn horseback riding, golf, and ballet. You bought her haute couture clothing and sent her on trips to Europe. I paused, letting my words fully sink in. And what about me? I wore cheap clothes you bought from Walmart. You told me girls should be modest and frugal. You made me apply for student loans for college, telling me our family was poor and I needed to understand thrift. You even altered my college applications after my high school graduation. I originally wanted to go to an excellent school in California, but you said the tuition was too expensive and insisted I apply to the state university here. My voice became increasingly agitated. Why? Because you needed to save money to buy Victoria the latest Chanel bags. The people in the corridor gasped audibly. The contrast between a used Honda and a Lamborghini was so stark, so absurd, that everyone showed expressions of complete disbelief and shock. My mother's lips trembled. She could no longer speak. I turned toward Dad lying in the hospital bed, looking at his weak body. How much longer do you want to keep pretending? Pretending to be unconscious? I said coldly. You had Daniel drag me here, but your real purpose was to get me to donate bone marrow, wasn't it? Robert pretends to be unconscious. Patricia cries and plays the poverty card on the side. Daniel uses moral manipulation. Then when the doctor mentions you need a bone marrow transplant, you plan to use family obligation to force me to donate. And Victoria, my wealthy sister, she obviously can't donate to you. Maybe her bone marrow isn't compatible, or maybe she simply doesn't want to. So you thought of me. My analysis cut into them like knife after knife. Chapter 11. The Complete Truth. Mom immediately froze in place. Her face became even more pale, but soon her face flushed red, and she screamed in an almost frenzied tone. No, Grace, how could you think such things about your parents? I don't know where you heard these ridiculous stories. How could we possibly have another daughter? How could we possibly deceive you? Is that so? I was too lazy to argue with her. I opened another video on my phone. This was captured from Victoria's social media. In the video, Victoria was racing the Lamborghini on the highway late at night. Her speed clearly exceeded safety limits, and at a sharp turn, her car lost control. The Lamborghini crashed into the guardrail at a terrifying speed. The vehicle flipped once, twice, 3 times in the air. Finally, it crashed heavily to the ground. The entire car was destroyed beyond recognition. Victoria, covered in blood, was pulled from the wreckage by paramedics and placed on a stretcher. One of her legs was obviously broken, and her face was covered with blood and glass fragments. I continued calmly, "She's in this hospital right now, probably lying in some room. I saw her name on the registration list when I was here earlier. Should I go visit her? After all, she is my sister, right?" I had finally spoken the truth. That dirty, bloody reality hidden beneath 20+ years of lies disguised as love. The entire corridor fell into complete silence. Everyone was shocked, speechless by this television drama-worthy plot. They looked at each other, then all turned their gazes toward the hospital room. The room fell into a brief but terrible silence. Finally, a fit of coughing broke the awful quiet. Dad, Robert, suddenly opened his eyes. His breathing became very rapid. He forcefully pulled off all the medical tubes attached to his body, making loud noises. Then his expression completely changed. The previous weak and pitiful expression completely disappeared. In its place was a cold look filled with malice. He sat on the edge of the bed, staring at me intently. There was not a trace of fatherly love in his eyes, only the embarrassed rage of someone whose conspiracy had been exposed. Good, 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 truly worthy of being Robert's daughter. He said good 3 times, his voice rising with each repetition. Then he suddenly rushed at me, snatching the photos and bone marrow transplant medical estimate from my hands. He tore them to shreds with force, the paper fragments floating in the air. "Since you know everything, we don't need to keep acting anymore." He pointed at my nose, his face twisted with fury as he roared. His voice was so loud it echoed throughout the entire hospital room. "Grace, I'm telling you, today, you will donate that bone marrow whether you want to or not. Do you hear me clearly?" Patricia also tore off her hypocritical loving mother mask. She put her hands on her hips like a shrew cursing in the street. She pointed at me, using the most vicious language. "That's right. We raised you for 20+ years, and now we're asking you to save your sister's life. What's wrong with that? It's what you should do. Don't forget, we gave you your very life. Now we're asking you to contribute some bone marrow, and you're whining and complaining, you ungrateful creature. You heartless thing." Her language became increasingly crude and vicious. Everyone in the corridor was stunned. They had not expected such a dramatic reversal, leaving them momentarily speechless. Daniel stood frozen in place. His lips moved for a moment, but he could not say anything. He looked at Robert and Patricia with empty eyes, as if seeing them for the first time. He probably never imagined that the kind, simple, loving aunt and uncle he knew could have such faces. I looked at them and said in a very cold tone, "What I should do?" Then I laughed. But this was not happy laughter, but laughter filled with despair and sarcasm. "What makes you think I would save an illegitimate daughter who has stolen 20+ years of parental love that should have been mine, squandered money and opportunities that should have been mine, and nearly destroyed my life?" "You!" Robert was so angry he raised his hand as if to hit me. But I did not dodge. I simply looked at him coldly. I took out my phone and opened the camera, pointing the screen directly at him. "Go ahead and hit me. Why did you stop? Are you afraid I'll expose all your dirty deeds?" I opened my phone's photo album, sliding through image after image on the screen. Each one was evidence I had gathered over the years through private investigators. "Look at this, everything you've done behind my back all these years. Besides what I mentioned, there's much more. You opened companies under Robert's name in 5 different states, but the income from these companies was never reported on tax returns. You used these companies to transfer assets and evade taxes." My voice was very calm, but full of power. "I also have email correspondence between you and lawyers, clearly showing how you planned all of this. I have contracts for purchasing those properties and vehicles. Everything has been organized by my lawyer and can be handed over to the IRS at any time." I paused, letting my words fully penetrate. "There's one more thing. I have video from the hospital's internal surveillance system, clearly showing your conversation in this room. In the video, you explicitly state your plan: to deceive me into donating bone marrow. In legal terms, this is called fraud and coercion." Both of their faces immediately turned death gray. Robert tried to lunge at me, but his body was too weak. He only staggered a few steps before collapsing to the floor. Patricia screamed and tried to rush at me, but was stopped by medical staff. I calmly walked past them toward the hospital room door. I knew this was all over.